So this is my journal reflection for week 1 readings. I decided to do the video blogs because honestly, I'm kind of lazy and I write enough and I didn't feel like writing out all of my reflections. So I will be vlogging all of my journals for the rest of the semester. I didn't want to say exactly what I said in my voice thread. So I wanted to connect with the reading about the triumph of email. And I actually just remembered something. When I was in middle school, I made a change from Catholic school to public school. And when I went to Catholic school, we wrote everything out by hand. We had to write in cursive, everything like that. There was very little use of computers. We had computer class, but we barely used the computers. When I got to middle school and I went to a public school, we automatically got our own email accounts, which at 12, I had no clue how to send an actual email. But I just remembered that when we would have access to computers in the computer lab, like during computer class or doing schoolwork or whatever, you could have pre-made sign-offs at the bottom and everyone would put in multicolor their name, song lyrics. It was almost like our own version of MySpace. That I don't know if MySpace was really big anymore in 2012. I don't think it was. No. See, that really wasn't even that was about, that wasn't that long ago and I can't even remember. But the point was, we would use our email almost as if it was this instant messaging system while we were just sitting in class. And we would just have chains and chains of emails from each other, not relating to schoolwork at all. And so I think it's interesting that even though email to me it's important for work and school contact and everything, I think people treat it as an antiquated form of communication when I was in middle school and that was our only choice because not many people had cell phones at 12 or, got on AIM wasn't really a thing anymore. So there weren't really any systems to chat with each other after school besides calling each other on the phone, like dinosaurs. I thought that was just a really interesting thing to remember and to just connect with the reading and see also how long ago it all feels and how actually not long ago that was. And all these readings made me feel very old to see the progression. And I kind of talked about this in my voice thread, but to see the progression of the internet and tech devices and social media has gotten so big just in my lifetime. I have a younger sister who's 13 and this stuff just seems like it's always existed. But I remember sitting on the family computer and it was beige and had a giant monitor. It was super clunky and old. I remember that. And now I have a laptop that is about this thin. So it's weird to just see your life just kind of flash right before your eyes. I apologize if you hear my roommates in the background. This is my second time filming this. This is my weekly journal reflection for the readings of week 2. To be honest, it was kind of difficult to get through these readings. They're not particularly exciting to read, no offense. But just thinking about my general responses, here I'm looking at the part of the article talking about multimedia use over time and how it's more common for people to kind of have conversations from one piece of social media to texting to, another social media, but that also kind of shortens the amount that you communicate in that time. So you're giving shorter responses and less information. And kind of when thinking about how that applies to myself, once again, I kind of thought about when I was younger and how I used media versus now as an adult and how that kind of affects my life. And I remember being in middle school and early high school and just having a phone. That's basically one of my only modes of communication. Also, social media, but that having conversations on social media wasn't something that I did frequently. I can't really remember how popular Snapchat was yet. But I make myself sound like a dinosaur. But I remember being able to just sit on my phone and have text conversations that went on for paragraphs and sit there and reply instantly and talk for hours and hours. And now, as an adult, I don't want that. If I want to have a long conversation, I want it to be in person or I want it to be over the phone because, frankly, I don't have the time. I talk too much. I don't have the time to put in the amount of detail into typing it all out on a tiny little phone. And I honestly get frustrated when I might be having a conversation with my friends over text, and then they're also then starting a conversation with me over Snapchat or in my Twitter, Instagram DMs, and suddenly you're talking on 3 different platforms. And it's just confusing trying to then keep up with 3 different conversations going on with the same person in the same span of time. So yeah, that's how I kind of reflected on that. Regarding anything else, just, yeah, I didn't really have a ton of takeaways from these articles. I'm sorry. This is my journal entry for the readings of week 3. I'm a little bit behind, so I'm going to be doing week 3 and week 4 together, but in separate videos. I wanted to focus on something different than what I talked about in my voice thread. And so I'm going to focus on the Zoom fatigue article. And I actually think this is really interesting because my first assumption of why we're getting Zoom fatigue is just kind of staring at a screen constantly all day and kind of the same idea that we've all been experiencing of just always feeling like you're, attached at your hip with your laptop or, your cell phone or something all day because of working from home and school from home and everything. But what I didn't think about is kind of like the dramaturgy aspect of it, and like the front stage, backstage. I didn't think about the idea of it's like everybody's eyes are on you. One example that I can pull from the most is I'm taking a playwriting class right now, and it's the only class that I have that meets on Zoom on its like meeting times during the week or whatever. And actually, I really love it. The professor has been making us do about 10 to 15 minutes of bullshit time at the beginning of each class to just kind of get to know each other. It's a very small class. It requires everyone to keep your microphones and screens on the whole time to get, reactions when people are reading your plays and things to get accurate kind of expressional feedback. Like you don't someone kind of snorting at a line or something is a reaction to your work. So it makes sense and everything. And it's made it fun because I feel like I can get to know my classmates like I would in a class setting. But I can tell that I'm trying my best to make my personality come through. But I know that if I was in a classroom, we would all be so much closer, so much faster. Because, when you're kind of having this like bullshit conversation with people, you're riffing off of each other and there's a lot of jokes back and forth and everything. You can't really do that over a video conference because of the feedback and everything you get. It's really hard to focus on, if I kind of talk over somebody on accident, but I throw in a joke, someone might not hear my joke, but then everyone's looking at me because they saw my mouth move. And I also have noticed that I almost spend the whole time staring at my own face rather than looking at my classmates. And also on top of that, we, so 2 or 3 people will present a play each class and we do like table reads of them. I have a very hard time, focusing my eyes on the screen for that long during the day. And so I have to pull my laptop about this close to my face. And sometimes, when I flub the line or whatever, I'm this close to the camera and I'm like, and then oh God, I can't read. And then and then everyone can see kind of my embarrassment and like my mistakes are extra apparent because everyone's staring directly at me. If I was in a room, it would have been easier to play that off or something. So yeah, I just didn't really think about, the specifics of my assumption was I feel tired because I'm just constantly on the computer and I feel drained. But I didn't think about like the sociology type implication that you're just always like on. You're always like, with when you're with your friends, you can still be on and be yourself, but also feel relaxed in like the presence of them. But when it's over, a phone call, you feel like you have to exaggerate your facial expressions and what you're saying so you can make sure that people are actually hearing you properly. And yeah, it's just tiring. So yeah. This is my weekly journal for the readings of week 4. If you hear the music, it's my next door neighbors. I wanted to kind of expand on my opinions of the reading about communication privacy management theory. I actually felt this theory not a lot of, it did make a lot of sense, but I felt like I was able to apply it better. I felt like some of maybe the theories we've read so far are kind of very much based in the way that communication technology communicates with itself rather than it being more personal. I don't really know how to explain it. Some of the communication theories have been like just focused on how computers kind of communicate with each other rather than people communicating with computers, if that makes sense. I'm sure as the person who teaches this course, yes, that does make sense to you. But anyways, trying to think about how I could apply this to myself, I was actually thinking about, I don't know if you know what these are, but some people make Finstas, so fake Instagrams, and you find a lot on there that's where people kind of like dump all of their emotional baggage and kind of break away a little bit from the typical social media presentation of yourself, but also in a way that is also presenting a different version of yourself. I think a lot of people use it to kind of almost make their personality seem like a fun, hot mess. Like, it's a lot of people showing really embarrassing videos of them, being under the influence of alcohol or drugs or crying about what's going on in their life. And it's kind of heavy and almost, you watch these things and you're like, why are you sharing this online? Like, even though maybe the account is private, people can still find those things. The same thing with private Snapchat stories. You now have the ability to create Snapchat stories that are only seen by people that you select. So not everyone can see them. They're private. I think I already said that. But applying this communication privacy management theory to that, the theory talks about, there are rules and boundaries to the theory, especially of, unspoken rules of once you confide maybe your private information with another person or a group of people, there are unspoken rules that they are not supposed to repeat that unless, they're worried about your health and safety or something like that. And if they do break that boundary, you've broken, the trust of the person that confided that information in you. When thinking about these private stories, I'll have friends who maybe follow a mutual acquaintance on, their fake Instagram. And then they'll talk about, oh, did you see so-and-so's post about, I don't know, so-and-so broke up, or, oh, I think that they're, I guess the phrase I was going to use was subtweeting, but kind of the idea of talking about someone without naming them, or just knowing how they act in regular everyday life and then seeing what they're posting on these private stories and things like that, and kind of puzzle piecing their present self versus their kind of backstage social media self, and reading in between the lines of like what's actually going on in their life. So you could be like, oh, maybe so and so broke up because they just posted, really depressing song lyrics with a black and white picture of them crying. I don't know. But I feel like you can kind of apply the privacy boundary theory to that in the way that these people put people in their private stories or let people follow them on their fake Instagrams with the intention of they're showing this more intimate, vulnerable self to still a lot of people, but hoping and expecting that maybe people don't show that to other people when in reality you're putting that on social media, especially if it's not like Snapchat where it goes away after 24 hours. If it's on a fake Instagram and you don't delete the post or something, people completely would have the ability to take that information and show it to other people that the original content maker didn't intend for them to see. And so it's just kind of, yeah, that's just kind of where my head went with connecting the theory to everyday life. This is my journal entry for week 5. I honestly really had a lot of connections with the readings for this week. First of all of the articles on dating apps and things, that was what I really connected with. Obviously, as a college student in my 20s, I've definitely used dating apps before. And I kind of have differing opinions on it. In some ways, I completely agree with some of the articles about this idea that people are less... I don't think people are just going to stop committing to long-term relationships and all of that. I don't think it's going to go to that extreme. There's always going to be people that prefer to be monogamous and in long-term relationships and stuff. But I feel like dating apps and the fast pace of like swiping and having an immediate opinion on someone based on their physical appearance and then having to wait to know each other on a personal level, I think it's created this culture of what kind of mentioned in some of the articles. You start dating and you're like, cool, yeah, they're fine. I picked them for some of the qualities that I felt like they met on like maybe a mental list that I had. But can I find somebody better? And so I do kind of feel like for some people in a way, it's a game of how many people can I collect? How many people can I talk to? For how long? What can I get from this? Whatever. And it's a game of what you get out of it instead of actually getting to know people. But I also feel like people are kind of getting sick of that. Like I've noticed, especially Tinder has kind of died down in popularity, I think, because at this point, people treat it as a joke. You get on, nobody messages each other. People don't even put up like pictures of themselves half the time, or they mix in memes with pictures of themselves, which just kind of confuses me because I'm like, why are you even using this dating app if you have no intention? People are like dating without intention, and it's super frustrating. Regarding the TED Talk about being alone together, I also have differing opinions on that. In some ways, I've totally experienced going to hang out with friends or something, and then people just kind of sitting on their phones the whole time instead of actually interacting or keeping up a conversation with you, but out of instinct, just always checking their phone. But I don't know if it's just the people that like I attract in friendships and in relationships, but I'm a person that I prefer to give someone my undivided attention if I can help it. And so I don't really see technology, interfering with my relationships in that way. I feel like I can still sit and have a conversation with people, but I think it's because I attract people of the same values as me. I would not say that a ton of my friends are very materialistic or sucked into their phones. But I definitely do see people my age and any age, to be honest, being like that. My grandmother is always complaining that no one interacts with her, and then she comes to visit and she sits on her phone the whole day, speech text speech texting her friends, which is super annoying, and sitting on her Kindle and on Facebook. So it's not just generational. I think it's more value-based. This is my journal entry for week 6. I'm gonna focus, I'm sorry if I butcher this, on the Friedersdorf article and also the Steinberg article. On the Friedersdorf, on the article about social media and getting fired from your job, I actually saw something that kind of changed my perspective about that semi-recently on TikTok or something. And it was people talking about kind of corporate culture, especially, well, talking in the American sense. And it really made me think about what we expect from professionalism and stuff, just in any kind of job. And I do believe that when you go to work, you are representing a company to an extent, depending on what kind of job you do. And you should be presenting your best self and not, don't show up to your job being an asshole, because then no one's going to like you. But the idea that a job can fire you for something that you posted on your own personal, private social media outside of work hours, I think it's a different situation if you get fired from your job because you're posting, things on social media and stuff pertaining to drama at work, naming people, or making social media things at work when you're on the clock and you're not actually being productive and doing your job. And let's be honest, I'm sure we all have moments at work while we're not being that productive and we are in social media, but there's a difference between, filming a TikTok, as it's been a trend during the pandemic of nurses filming TikToks while at work, almost shaming people, like nurses promoting non-COVID safe actions and stuff, like spreading misinformation about the virus and things. If you're doing that at work and you're working in the health industry, yeah, I think you should be fired, or at least reevaluated in your position. But the idea that we have to then promote and represent our corporation or whatever job that we work for, the industry, in our own private time doesn't sit right with me. There are people who have very alternative lifestyles and they can go to their corporate job and their 9 to 5 or whatever and work. And then on the weekend, they want to go and live the rave life and go to a bunch of EDM festivals. And maybe they're doing, illegal drugs or something. Like, as long as, you don't go to that rave wearing the logo of the business that you work for, I don't think it's your job's business what you do in your free time. So that was just a very interesting article to read. With the Steinberg article and being hired during COVID, I actually got hired for a job during all of this. I got hired for 2 jobs, but one I interviewed for. I had the video interview and stuff, and it was a very weird experience. I honestly think it is the best interview I've ever had in my entire life. And I don't know if it was because, I wouldn't even say that I was in a familiar place, because I actually had to go home to my parents' home that weekend. And I was in my childhood bedroom, but it's not really my bedroom anymore. So yeah, I wouldn't even add that as a factor. But I was worried about, what time do I go into the meeting? There were a bunch of people in the meeting that I didn't realize were going to be there interviewing me. It was almost like a board and then me as the interviewee. But I actually really felt like I was the one pushing the conversation. I felt very in control. I felt like I was the one dressed the most professionally for the people that were interviewing me, which was kind of interesting. But also, of course, I want to put forward my best impression. But I felt like, because I was in my own space, they couldn't see me very well. I just felt like I had the opportunity to sit and really think about what I was trying to say, how I wanted them to see me. And I think I could kind of connect it to one of the past articles about Zoom fatigue and how it was about you kind of are more outward with your facial expressions. You over express, kind of like how I'm doing right now, but I naturally talk with my hands. And I don't know, I felt like being interviewed over the computer was just way more calming. I felt ready. I think maybe because when you're in an in-person interview, people can see if you're sweating, your hands are shaking, whatever. But through a screen, you can't really, I can hide my hands if I feel like they're shaking, or, you can't tell that I'm sweating through my shirt, like out of nervousness. So, yeah, those were just the applications to my own life that I made. This is my journal entry for week 7. Regarding memes, honestly, when thinking about what I wanted to discuss with this journal, I know that I look at memes all the time, but for some reason, nothing comes to the top of my head. I honestly think I watch more TikToks, or God, I feel old saying that. TikToks or GIF reactions or just general videos to things now. I feel like that's where it's kind of progressed. I think that kind of started with Vine and then Musical.ly, but Musical.ly was not as big as TikTok, whatever. But I like the idea of the resemiotization, because they couldn't have picked an easier word to say. But I think it's funny because you can take more so a gift or something in the context that you send it to someone in versus the context of where maybe that GIF or meme came from. Maybe it's a picture of, say, Ryan Gosling rolling his eyes, whatever. I could send that to my parents after they make a cheesy joke and it's just me rolling my eyes. I could send that to a group chat of my girlfriends and we could have been talking about people we were attracted to, and suddenly you put Ryan Gosling rolling his eyes and suddenly it has a completely different context. And so I think it's interesting that the way that we can send and communicate with these ever-changing pieces of content, you're able to kind of craft what you want it to mean to you and the people closest to you. If I shared it on the internet with like a tweet or something, it needs to be, I guess, conveyed by a larger audience rather than being more of an inside joke or something between a small group of friends or my family. So, yeah. Distracting. This is my journal entry for week 8, the readings for week 8. I actually decided to use one of the readings for this week on my midterm paper, media multiplexity theory. I thought it was interesting because it seemed like a newer theory. It kind of explained in the article that there hasn't been a ton of research and things put into this theory, but I think that it's easy to apply to life kind of today. I found that with some of the media theories, it's hard for me to kind of apply them to myself and comprehend them because sometimes I feel like they get too based in the technicality of everything, which, duh, that's the point. But it sometimes it's very dry and hard to understand. But with media multiplexity theory, I immediately thought of the way that I communicate with my family and my friends, obviously. One thing I kind of wanted to touch on is like Facebook. I hate Facebook. I barely use it. I feel a little bit guilty because most of my timeline is just me asking for donations to GoFundMe's for film projects, which makes me seem kind of sleazy and I don't like that. But my family insists on using it. In fact, sometimes they get mad at me for not knowing things that are going on in extended family because I don't get on, sorry. I fumbled over my words. And I think that's kind of interesting because, as media multiplexity theory points out, kind of your tie strength depends on the types of media that you use to communicate, and how frequently you do it. I have a regular text group chat with my immediate family, my parents and my sisters, and we message each other on definitely a day-to-day basis, definitely weekly, about small things that aren't super important, sharing recipes, what's going on in life, whatever. But on Facebook, that seems to be where, my aunts are posting about their children, or extended family members have passed away, and things like that I have no clue is going on. A, because I'm busy with college, but also B, I don't get on. And so that does kind of negatively impact my relationship with extended family and sometimes my immediate family, because I just don't pay attention. I don't use that social media. So yeah, that was just kind of my opinions on this week's. Obviously it's a little bit smaller because I'm busy working on the paper, but yeah, I just really don't like Facebook. This is my journal entry for week 9. I think the main idea that's kind of followed through the course of this week's 3 readings is how dangerous the internet can be, in terms of kind of weaponizing what we put out there and then people using our own content against us. So deepfakes, huge issues with consent. And then you have the Reddit article. And in some ways, I think that the owner of the website was kind of in the right. It's hard to leave places for there to be hate speech, and obviously it's going to occur, but then also you kind of deal with, but it's their right to talk about everything, and for me to want the right to be able to talk about anything that I want, anytime that I want, then you kind of, in fairness, although many people don't agree with it, you kind of have to let hate groups and stuff like that be able to have their space to talk about, whatever bullshit they want to discuss, however harmful it may be. With my own experience with it, I wouldn't really say experience, but okay, so I'm a media student. I want to work in the film industry. And it's kind of like making a found film edit or something. You can take whatever clips you want from the internet and you can make them look like whatever you want them to look like. There are people that do super cuts of characters from movies and TV shows that they really, really like. And it's anything hot that they've ever done. It's they take a scene from a movie where the character is looking off into the distance and rolling their eyes, and they edit these things to then create these actors and characters and stuff into these sex objects. It's a super cut of everything that they've done. And it's kind of okay, yeah, that's there for some people's enjoyment, but also, where do we look at how does that make that actor feel? Does that make them feel wildly uncomfortable? It probably would make me feel wildly uncomfortable if someone made a supercut of every video I've ever made for anything, any picture of me. That would make me feel really weird if I just came across that on the internet. But some people have it in their heads that that's for their own leisure and pleasure, and it has nothing to do with the consent of the person that's in those videos. So it's just interesting because the internet is supposed to be a place for, a source of knowledge, a source of our own leisure and entertainment, a source of making money for some people. But then it's what legislation do we have over the internet? Do we even want legislation over the internet? Because I don't really want to be, there are countries that can't even say what they want on social media, can't even have access to social media. They only have a certain amount of access to certain TV shows or just anything like that. And it's like, I don't want that taken away from me. So then how do we even take care of the weird stuff that exists, such as, deep fakes that are being used to villainize people when that's not like the main intention? Basically, we just have no power in anything. I just realized I end a lot of these journals very depressing. I'm okay. This is just my stream of consciousness. And who knows? Someone could use this journal and make a super cut of it and make me sound like a horrible person. So that's just what we all deal with. This is my weekly entry for week 11. Regarding going away from the topic of artificial intelligence and Lil Michaela and all that stuff, which, to be honest, kind of freaks me out. The third article on big data and personal data about ourselves, I thought it was very interesting, a little bit confusing to read, but so like at the end in the conclusion of the article, they talked about how this big data, the data that we collect on ourselves, could actually be beneficial for things like concerning global warming and stuff, and watching our water consumption, our food consumption, what we are eating, our use of waste products and things like that. In those ways, I think big data could be very important. But the thing that I found perplexing, there are things like Apple now tracks your phone usage throughout the week. And again, connecting back to the idea that's been coherent throughout this entire course of how these things can be useful, but with the general, not aura, but kind of trend of people using things to kind of point out their flaws in a productive way, but then instead you just think about it and you think about it and you think about it and you become hyper aware of things that you do. So like you see your data usage of your phone weekly and you think, oh, I'm not on my phone that much. And then you're like, oh my God, I spent 7 hours on average checking my phone. And then you fall down this little rabbit hole of, oh my God, I reach for my phone anytime that I'm just not immediately connected on something, or I'm watching TV, but I'm still on my phone, or I'm talking to my friend, but now I'm looking at my phone, or you reach for it when it's not even there. And so I don't even know. It's just so interesting how we create these data sets and these devices and everything to help us. And then as soon as we start using them, we've almost created this culture of just hating ourselves for any tiny thing that we do, because we're instead not using it for the advantages of helping global warming and things like that, but we're just it's almost like a self-deprecation of using our technology. I don't know. That's just where my mind went with this week's readings. So this is my journal entry for November 11th. Regarding this week's reading, I actually had a lot of thoughts on it. I felt like a lot of the conversations I've been having with friends and things that I've been thinking about this past couple of weeks actually kind of matched what the reading was talking about. So the one that I felt like I kind of understood and connected with the most was the Popova reading. I hope I'm saying that right. And the idea of kind of letting the internet answer all of our questions all the time, and what is that actually doing to our ability to be creative or to think through things on our own. I feel like right now with Corona and everything and getting to the end of the semester, I've kind of been retracting a lot from talking to friends, from using technology. But I've also found myself throughout the past couple months, and especially this semester and living with my roommates, I've been very reflective of the past. I've been, you gotta get bored of doing the same thing over and over again. And I like to share stories. And I've noticed that I've been talking more about my past, or I'll be having a conversation with someone and they'll say something, and it's like I think about this one song or this one object, and I remember something from high school, from when I was a kid. And then that story comes flowing out, and as I tell it, then I remember more things. And so that's kind of part of not the semantic knowledge, but the episodic. Um, but I feel like because I've been so drained because of Corona and online school and everything, and I haven't really been relying on the internet that much, it's actually allowed me to tap into my episodic memory so much more. And it's actually made me feel more creative again, because it's like it's like mental mementos, which kind of rhymed on accident, but I'll just hear a song and I'll be like, I remember listening to that in eighth grade. Oh, and then I had a crush on this person. Oh, and then this person. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that. And that's kind of like how it all flows together. And I feel like when, I'm constantly online, working online for school and for my actual job and everything, I'm so focused on, I need to get these tasks done. I need to finish this project, or I need to be reading this book. And my mind is so clogged up with the fact of the mental list, and feeling like I'm always forgetting something. It's like your brain is numb to the point that you can't tap into that episodic memory. You don't want to think about the past because you literally barely have enough time to think about what is right in front of you. And relating that back to technology, I feel like not really thinking through, the tip of your tongue type things and just constantly looking up the answers. Yeah, you can kind of get stuck in that rabbit hole of finding out more information and like fun facts that you didn't already know. But you can also remember more of your past and your actual personal experiences and emotions when you're not really relying on the internet to answer your questions. So I definitely really enjoyed this week's readings. Yeah. This is my journal entry for week 13. I have so many opinions on hashtag activism. In some ways, I think it is good, and I kind of referenced this in my voice thread. I think it's good at getting global issues out to a very wide audience across the internet. There are a lot of things that I've learned about, riots in Egypt. I've learned about, feminist issues in France and things like that. Things that, American media probably wouldn't cover usually, or if it did cover it, it's not as in-depth and thorough as the people who are actually experiencing it. The issue that I kind of want to take up in this journal is taking hashtag activism and then watering it down so much by corporations to then gain money. So this is like Oreos during Pride Month, like creating a hashtag being like hashtag, we support or something. Businesses using hashtag activism to seem woke, to seem with it, when, if you look at their corporations, sometimes they do, but usually they don't support the groups that they're actually supporting. And they're just using it to seem with the times to gain more consumers. And so I think that side of hashtag activism always starts, I think, good. But with the internet, as we've kind of talked about through this entire course, everything goes south very quickly. And regarding my own use of media and hashtag activism, I don't usually participate in it unless it's such a big event that I feel like I really need to have an opinion on it. I'm trying to think, like, I can't think of a time that I ever was like, hashtag girl boss. Like, I personally, I think that stuff is kind of cringy. I don't think that there's really a lot of meaning in it. Usually if I follow any type of hashtag activism, it's getting on Twitter and looking at a hashtag if something bad has happened in the world and I'm trying to stay up to date with people's personal things. That was more likely to happen when there would be mass shootings or some sort of terrorist attack or some sort of big world event. And that's not really an activism type thing. It's more of like there's been a disaster. So personally, hashtag activism, it matches the times, but I don't personally support it that much. This is my journal entry for the readings of week 15. First, I'd like to focus on the Minecraft uncensored kind of library. I didn't know about that, and that to me, super smart and super important. I've thought for years about how, I mean, I'm kind of happy the laws are behind, but it doesn't seem like laws have kind of kept up with how quickly social media and the internet and everything has progressed. You can kind of look at examples of that. Honestly, 2013, that kind of era when I was in middle school, of like issues with cyberbullying. I mean, it still exists, it's still rampant, but there's really not a ton of legislative domain there, as far as I know. I haven't done a ton of research on it, but that is just, it's like the place that you'd never expect. I don't know. That reading just really struck me. More importantly, focusing on the idea of citizen journalism. Of course, there are some issues with that, with people putting out information that isn't true, or you can kind of see that on Twitter. If you find a thread of someone, it might be like a type of citizen journalism where they'll be like, oh, don't talk to this person or go to this establishment. There has been issues of sexual harassment. Here is evidence. Or they'll talk about like political issues and stuff, and they'll talk about like politicians. They'll be like, they're saying this, but then here's all this evidence of history of where they've said the opposite of that. But then people will join in that thread and then be like, oh, well, you're wrong because blah, blah, blah. And then you'll kind of look into what they're saying. And it's an easy way for, if someone's reading that and they don't want to do the research and do an in-depth dive of what is fact and what isn't, they could read something and be like, oh, well, I agree with this person. And that person could just be making something up completely. So there's that issue. I think one way that it's super helpful, coming from a female perspective, sexual assault allegations. So often it's sexual assault allegations, rape allegations, anything like that is not handled well legislatively, and it's not fair, and it, fucking pisses me off. And yes, again, there can be that side of people falsely accusing people, but I'm sorry, why would you do that? There are obviously reasons, but if someone experiences assault, saying that people are making up allegations is just an absolute insult to them and anything that's happened to them. And I think that citizen journalism is a fantastic way to get that kind of information out, especially if it's about someone with a ton of power, like a politician, someone working in the media industry. I mean, heck, that's how it happened with how the Me Too movement got started. And then you can kind of associate citizen journalism and then compare it to hashtag activism. So yeah, those are my thoughts.